What's shaking, people? Back with another reaction, back with the self-titled album Electronic from 1991. Again, we're talking Bernard Sumner from Joy Division and New Order and Johnny Marr from the Smiths. I enjoyed the first track. I was thinking that the name Electronic is almost like, a little bizarrely generic. Now, perhaps that was the point, because I was thinking, the name The Smiths. Smith is like one of the most common surnames in the English-speaking world, so I was thinking The Smiths, it's a very generic name, and yet because it's sort of packaged in that way, it becomes kind of memorable. So maybe that was the idea with Electronic. But I do think it's a kind of name that, like, it'll get buried and remembered less than names like, I don't know, Human League or Depeche Mode and, Duran and so on. Names which, I don't know, just have a bit more cachet than just the word electronic, though again, perhaps that simplicity was the point. Nevertheless, we are up to the second tune on their 1991 album, and it is called Reality. It's another, very simple title. It's one that perhaps speaks to epistemology most relevantly. Obviously, it relates to ontology, what is the being as it exists, but ultimately, what exists is ultimately filtered through the perception of us subjective creatures. So your epistemology, how you acquire what you consider to be knowledge, and that's, essentially your epistemological paradigm, will greatly affect what you think reality is. So whether we're talking, philosophical ideas, religious ideas, or even when it comes to like scientific realities like physics and chemistry, there's often a broad consensus, but on very particular questions there tends to be disagreement, and some people say, well, what I see from the evidence is this, and what you see from the evidence is that. And even though they're both approaching it from logical and scientific points of view, they come to different conclusions, which, hopefully if they're diligent in the way they practice science, they're not dogmatic about it, and they'll always remain willing to modify or abandon views based on new information. But the point is, reality is ultimately filtered through our subjective brains. And so while we try our best to use, again, maybe the best epistemological paradigm humans have yet conceived with the scientific method, it remains, murky what reality is. Certainly when it comes to particular issues or, a sort of level of reality much beyond, us terrestrial creatures here on Earth in one tiny little corner of this massively expanding universe. So these are all the crazy, stupid things that come to my brain when I think of the word reality. But again, fundamentally, I think of more epistemology than I do ontology, because ontology is like whatever exists like out there, whereas epistemology is like how we decision-making agents have to try to discern what is real, and then again make our own choices based on those realities. So and perhaps, knowing that this is an electronic album, maybe it won't even be so much relevant in terms of like, a large sort of philosophical concept about reality. It'll just be more the idea of like, in a given sort of sonic atmosphere, like, this is the reality of these sounds or whatever. So it could have a much more like visceral kind of meaning. So let's find out. I'll stop talking. This is Electronic. The tune is Reality, and it's from the 1991 album Electronic. And again, it just instantly sounds like a dance floor tune. Sorry, I just wasted like 3 minutes of your time, but this is the way my brain works. Nice for 91.
Can't you see there's nothing in your head and your body's on vacation? I
sense of hatred, but it's a sensation that feels alien to him. I do like that. Like those little percussive flourishes at the end of that measure. I mean, I heard vocal house from like a few years after this that like, this sounds like on the same level with, so again, I respect this for being 91. Did you hear that? I thought my system like conked out, but it didn't. I don't know what that was. I like this like fragmented, escalating build with the snare. Like, ooh, this is the best part so far. Yeah, I like this configuration right here. Yeah. Got a little more emotional as it's gone along. I was gonna say, I should have paused before I said vocal house earlier, because it's like, I feel like it's in a sort of like the middle area of a vocal house, early vocal trance kind of Venn diagram. It's more housey in terms of the overall sound, but there was, some melodic and ultimately emotional layers that, made me think about some early trance that I've heard, which again, like, I started listening to rave music late 96, early 97 especially, like, started going to rave parties more regularly, early 97. So I was hearing a lot of tunes that had been made 95, 96, and it should be no surprise then that, like, most of my favorite nostalgic tracks are typically made between like 95 and 99, especially like 96 to 98. So, again, that's when I was sort of like immersing myself in the culture, and again, when I first hit the scene, I'm hearing tracks that were made like a year or two earlier. And generally, I like tunes that go back to about 93. Before that, a lot of tunes in house and trance will sound dated to me, even if there are some exceptions, and even if like there are tunes where they sound dated, but they're still, they have sort of a quality and they have sort of a cachet that it makes sense that people still listen to them. But yeah, generally speaking, like vocal house or like house from before like 93, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but that's what I was thinking, that like some of the vocal house I remember hearing when I first got into the rave scene, It was on that same level as what we just heard. So yeah, the fact that they made that in 91 and they could have played it at a rave that I went to in like 96, 97, and I still would have said, yeah, you know, that fits in with a lot of what I'm hearing in the house rooms at these parties that I'm going to. I think that speaks well to the quality of that one. So yeah, a bit more emotional at the end, kind of with a bit of trance vibes, but ultimately I'd say, you know, my brain wants to put that in a vocal house category. So a cool tune. It seemed to be more like much more tightly focused. It felt like it was the reality about a relationship or, you know, a connection between two people that the narrator is now severing because he realizes he doesn't need this other person, and it's like you're thinking of someone else. Like, you're not thinking of me. That's some other guy that you're looking for because, you know, what you're looking for and talking about, that ain't me. So it felt like reality, which again, it's interesting, right? Because I was thinking about the idea of that, you know, people can think they're very rational and logical, but depending on what like epistemological paradigm they're filtering everything through, reality can look very different depending on like what angle you're looking at a situation from. And I felt like there was that concept, like, you know, writ small, if you will, like between two people, the microcosm. So yeah, do let me know what you think of the tune. Looking forward to going through the rest of the album. Again, just so many deep dives. I realized there was a sort of a gap between this last one. You know, it may not immediately come back around for the next few days, but ultimately I will keep my eye on this this deep dive, this group, because ultimately, you know, it's interesting to hear two people from groups that I am already familiar with to a certain extent. Obviously, Smiths, I'm really just kind of going through their catalog for the first time. In New Order, I really only know a few of their hits. I don't actually know their like proper catalog, but ultimately it's interesting to hear sort of, you know, like a super duo. It's like people from different famous groups that are then coming together to do something different from what they're mostly known for. So in any case, let me know what you think. I will see you next time. Peace.